I'm not going to warn you about what's coming. Just listen. Have you ever woken up in the middle of the night? No alarm, no sound, no reason. And in that first second, before you were fully awake, felt like someone was in the room with you. You didn't hear footsteps. You didn't see a figure. You just felt it. A pressure, a presence. The sense that the air in the corner of your room was slightly denser than it should be. Most people blame it on stress, on anxiety, on a bad dream fading out. But what if there was another explanation? What if it wasn't in your head, but in your walls? November 14th, 1978. Somewhere underground, in a concrete room with no windows, a man is sitting on a metal chair and feeling like someone is standing directly behind him. He doesn't turn around because he's afraid. Not just uncomfortable, genuinely terrified, cold in his stomach, hands sweating, afraid to see something that shouldn't be there. There is nobody in the room. The generator is running at 17 hertz. This is not the opening of a horror movie. This is an experiment protocol. And by the end of this video, you're going to understand why this affects you personally, why it affects your apartment, your bedroom, the corner you sometimes find yourself staring at in the dark. But first, I need to tell you about a program most Americans have already forgotten or were never supposed to know about in the first place. 1953, a classified program launches inside the CIA. It has no public name, no public budget, no public existence. Internally, they call it MK Ultra. The goal is a single question that has haunted American intelligence since the Korean War. Can you control the human mind? Not convince, not persuade. Control, like a machine, if you can just find the right switches. What followed was 20 years, over 150 separate research projects, 80 institutions, universities, hospitals, prisons across the United States. LSD administered to people without their knowledge or consent. Sensory deprivation until complete personality breakdown. Electroshock, hypnosis, psychological pressure so sustained it permanently altered who people were. People who signed up for what they were told was a medical study, who came in as one person and left as someone else. Some didn't leave at all. In 1973, the CIA director ordered all documents destroyed. Most files were burned, but a few boxes ended up in the wrong archive by mistake. In 77, they were found. Congress held hearings. The country learned what had been done in its name. Nobody went to prison. The official position became MK Ultra was an aberration, a product of Cold War paranoia, something that could never happen again. But here's what almost nobody talks about. MK Ultra was the program we found out about. It was the one that got exposed because a few boxes survived the shredder. The question that should keep you up at night is not what MK Ultra did. The question is what the programs we never found out about were doing at the same time. Because the United States government didn't stop experimenting on human minds in 1973. They just got more careful about the paperwork. And on the other side of the Iron Curtain, Soviet scientists were asking the same questions with fewer restrictions, more resources, and absolutely zero concern about congressional oversight. The Institute of Acoustic Neurophysiology doesn't appear in any public registry. What does appear is an ordinary administrative building at an ordinary address. What was below it, Sector B2, exists in no public directory. It exists only in documents that were partially declassified in 2009. The Soviet scientists in 1978 wanted to test one hypothesis. If infrasound at a specific frequency causes particular physiological and psychological reactions in an individual, fear, disorientation, the sensation of another presence, is it possible to synchronize those reactions across a group of isolated people? Can 12 people who cannot see or hear each other react identically, simultaneously, with a precision of fractions of a second? This was Project Resonance. But to understand what happened in that room, you first need to understand what 17 hertz actually is, not as a number, as physics. Sound is a pressure wave in air. Your ears perceive frequencies between 20 and 20,000 hertz. 20 hertz is an extremely deep bass you feel more in your chest than here. Everything below 20, your ears don't detect it. The eardrum doesn't respond. As far as your auditory system is concerned, it's silence. But the wave doesn't disappear. Infrasound passes through walls, through concrete, through earth. It travels for miles without losing almost any energy because air barely absorbs waves of that wavelength. Earthquakes, hurricanes, ocean swells, all of them produce infrasound. Whales and elephants communicate at infrasonic frequencies because these waves travel further than any other sound. And here is the critical part. Every organ in the human body has its own resonant frequency, the frequency at which it begins to vibrate in sync with an external wave. The lungs, 3 to 4 hertz, the stomach and abdomen, 4 to 8 hertz, the heart, around 5. The eyes, 9 to 18 hertz. 17 is right in the middle. When a source of infrasound at 17 hertz of sufficient intensity acts on a person, the eyeballs begin to vibrate in resonance with the wave. This is not metaphor or exaggeration. It is a documented physiological fact. The vibration of the eyeballs distorts the image on the retina. The brain begins to interpret the unstable visual signal, and it begins to interpret it. How does it interpret it?
When the signal is blurry and unstable, the brain completes it with the nearest familiar pattern. This is called pareidolia, the ability to see recognizable shapes in ambiguous stimuli. A face in static, a figure in a shadow, movement where there is no movement. Evolution designed us exactly this way, because in nature, it's better to see a predator that isn't there than to miss one that is. A false alarm is cheap. A missed threat is fatal. So the brain is configured to overcorrect, to see, to complete, to react. 17 hertz puts your visual system into permanent false alarm mode. Movement in your peripheral vision, shadows that don't exist, silhouettes that disappear when you look directly at them, a shape in the corner that turns out to be just the corner. Simultaneously, infrasound acts on the vestibular system, the inner ear that orients you in space. A slight disruption of vestibular signals creates the feeling that the space around you is unstable, that the room is breathing, that the walls are a little closer than they should be. And at the same time, it acts on the adrenal glands. Infrasound stimulates the release of cortisol, the stress hormone, with no visible cause. The body receives a danger signal, but doesn't know where it's coming from. No threat, no predator, nothing to direct the reaction toward. Just anxiety, growing, sourceless, impossible to rationalize. And in this state, eyes vibrating, vestibular system disrupted, cortisol spiking 38% above normal, your brain, which evolution spent thousands of years training to detect the presence of another living being nearby, begins working at full capacity. And it detects one. Not because anyone is there, but because it cannot not detect, because every system is screaming, danger, presence, someone close, and the brain aims that terror at the corner of the room, at the place where the shadow is a little thicker, where the air feels heavier. This is physiology. This is neurology. This is what happens to any person at 17 hertz. But the Soviet scientists wanted to know something beyond this. What if it's 12 people simultaneously? If you isolate them, remove every possibility of communication, and turn on the generator, will they react independently, or will something different emerge between them? They got their answer at minute 14. Now, the room. They paid well. I was working long shifts. Money was tight. The ad said it was a study of physical responses. One day, a few hours, a week's salary. I agreed without thinking too much. When I arrived, the first thing that surprised me wasn't the building. The building was ordinary, administrative, the kind you see anywhere. What surprised me was the route inside. There were 12 of us. We didn't talk to each other, just stood in a line. They took us through several doors with combination locks, down a staircase, down again. The pressure in my ears changed. We were deep. Then a long corridor, concrete, fluorescent lights buzzing slightly lower than normal. Something about that buzz was wrong. I told myself it was fatigue. The room was small, square, concrete on all sides, no covering, no paint, just gray concrete. One lamp in a metal cage on the ceiling, a metal chair in the center, no windows, a small video camera in the ceiling corner, and a ventilation grate above my head. They explained, just sit. There may be a slight background noise. That's normal. If you feel strong discomfort, speak into the microphone. We can hear you. No danger. The door closed. The lock clicked. I was alone. The first few minutes, nothing. The ordinary silence of an enclosed space, my own breathing, a distant mechanical hum somewhere behind the walls. I thought about what I'd buy with the money. I thought the chair was uncomfortable. And then something started to change. Not suddenly, not all at once, like someone was very slowly turning an invisible dial. First, just a slight sense that the space around me had shifted. It became denser, heavier. The air was still the same air. The light was still the same light, but something in the room was different, like a weight had appeared that hadn't been there before. Then, the feeling that there were more people in the room. I want to be precise because this matters. I didn't see anyone. I didn't hear anyone. I simply felt a presence behind me, a spatially specific presence, distance of roughly 3 feet, maybe less, another body standing too close. I'm an engineer. I don't get panic attacks. I don't have claustrophobia. But the feeling was so physically real, so concrete, so spatial, that I caught myself holding my breath like I was afraid that presence would hear me. I didn't turn around. I was afraid, genuinely afraid, cold in my stomach, heart pounding, palms wet, afraid to see something that shouldn't be there. At minute 14, I turned my head. Not because I decided to, not because I reasoned with myself and said, "There's nobody there, this is your imagination." I just turned, like something inside me turned my head from within, smoothly, naturally, like a completely normal movement. I looked at the northeast corner of the room. The corner was empty. Of course it was empty. Concrete, shadow, lamp shining evenly. But in that empty corner there was something. Not a person. I understood it wasn't a person. But the air there was different, denser, like there was more matter in it than in the rest of the room. And the light in the corner was slightly darker than it should have been. Not a shadow. Shadows have a source, have a shape. This was simply an absence of light, like the corner was absorbing it. I couldn't look away. I later learned that in that exact same second, with a variance of less than 0.8 of a second, all 11 other participants in their isolated rooms did the same thing, turned their heads in the same direction, all 12 simultaneously. 12 people, 12 separate concrete rooms. None of them could see or hear the others. One turn of the head, 0.8 of a second of difference. When I read that number in the declassified materials, I stared at it for a long time. 0.8 of a second is not coincidence, it's not random chance, it's synchronization with a precision that is impossible to explain by accident. 12 independent nervous systems received the same signal and responded at virtually the same moment. What signal? At minute 17, someone among us said out loud, "He's here." The transcription of the audio from my room carries my signature. I don't remember saying that at all, but I remember thinking exactly that someone was in the room, that he was here, that he was standing too close, and apparently it came out of my mouth. The pressure on my chest by that point was constant, not painful, just constant, like a hand placed on my sternum, pressing slightly down, with each breath a reminder. At minute 22, 3 of us lost our sense of orientation. 2 started crying. I don't know who. I couldn't look away from the corner. I told the microphone that it had gotten colder. The operator responded in an even voice. "Temperature is stable, 72 degrees. I was cold. At minute 32, something changed, as smoothly as it had started. The pressure on my chest eased. The air in the corner went back to normal. The feeling of presence didn't disappear. It retreated, like someone turned the dial back the other way. The generator was switched off. They took us out, a short formal debrief, papers to sign, money paid. They said, "Thank you, it's all over." But nothing was over. On the 3rd night at home, I woke up at 3 in the morning. No reason, no sound, and in the first second after waking, not yet knowing where I was or what was happening, I felt the same pressure on my chest, and I looked at the corner. The same corner, the northeast. That continued for more than a year. The official results of Project Resonance, the figures declassified in 2009. 12 participants, duration of exposure 32 minutes, frequency 17 Hz, stable, intensity 110 decibels. 3 lost consciousness during the session, not at the end, in the middle. The medical staff outside were prepared. The session was not interrupted. 5, in the 72 hours after the experiment, persistently reported the sensation of presence at home, in their own apartments, in familiar rooms they'd lived for years. 2 refused any further contact with the Institute. 1 of them moved within a month after the experiment. 1, 6 years of chronic sleep disorder, woke up every night at the same time, looking at the same corner. 1 died 4 months after the experiment. He was 34 years old. The cause of death in the documents is not stated, just a date, an age, a participant number in the protocol. 91% of participants showed persistent psychological disturbances of